What's up, everyone? So today we're going to examine a market that recently announced itself, and it probably shouldn't have. This is hands down probably one of the absolute worst darknet market launches that I've seen in a very long time. I've never actually seen a market doing a announcement and within the same announcement have the server technology so openly discussed, have such a resistance to what basically is just an introduction post. Now, before we get into the actual official announcement, let me just show you the marketplace itself and point out some of the glaring surface level issues that you can see just by looking at it. And after that, we'll go deeper into the analysis of why this market is actually fundamentally flawed. So here you can see the XMR and BTC, they haven't even figured that out yet. That doesn't even exist. Here, we can hardly even see the text. We have to highlight it to actually see it. So I had two periods at the bottom. I'm trying not to be picky. This is supposed to not reflect the final version, yada, yada, yada. Absolutely. It absolutely reflects the final version because we'll come over here, look at something different. See, secure and trusted platform, which I don't think anyone should trust this platform. It's definitely a unique model. The model is don't trust it. You see here, there's no products listed. The fact that they would do a launch and they wouldn't have an invite for vendors or anything like that is absolutely crazy. There's nothing here. Like, what's the point of even doing this? Look up here, we see like in a world of darkness. It's just the wording, like the wording alone just drives me nuts throughout all of this. It's just nonsense. There's to say that the platform is designed for, the highest security standards when they can't even implement a Captcha right is asinine. So here we see, but Elastic Corporation. I mean, dude, this isn't a corporation. It's not going to be on the NASDAQ ever, like it's absolutely crazy how delusional they are. And you can see right here, you can't even make it so that we can see the text. This absolutely should have been something that was figured out way before this was actually posted anywhere. So here we'll hop in, we'll go to login. But before we do that, I wanted to point out this big thing on the right where there's nothing in it. It was an interesting design perspective to have an abyss on the right side. Anyways, side issue. So we'll click on sign up at the bottom here. Okay. So were we a vendor or buyer? We're going to go with buyer for the sake of demonstration. And here we see, enter username. So just put in during Fed time. Your PIN, something random. It says that it has to be 6 digits. Enter country. It's kind of weird. This isn't a drop down. Like, what happens if someone spells it wrong? It doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. Enter password. Create one real quick. We'll bring it back over. Toss it in. And here we go. All right, you guys, you want to enter that capture? You can't see it. It is actually there, but you can hardly see it with this. I can only see it now because I've zoomed in on it. But it's absolutely crazy how you can't see anything, If we look at the source code of this, we would see the actual text. We'd be able to plug it in and sign up. It's just, sign up to the world of anonymous. We can't sign up to the world of anonymous is broken. So it's just, it's really unfortunate that it's just such trash. And, we end up coming back here and things look even more broken now than when we were here last time. And we were here like 3 seconds ago. This site just gets worse and worse. You can see up here, they can't even render with the actual prices. This is nuts. This is nuts. Absolute trash. We click on the how to buy and sell guides, and this is what we get. Nothing. Why would you make this live? Even if you call it beta, why would you make this live? There's nothing here. It's trash. It makes you look horrible. So right off the bat, one of the most absurd choices that Blackhole made was hosting their site on Amazon Web Services, or AWS. This is just outright an insane choice, given that Amazon's notorious for its cooperation with law enforcement and governmental agencies. AWS regularly complies with law enforcement requests for data, which absolutely makes it a massive OPSEC failure to host any darknet marketplace on that. For context, AWS is one of the largest cloud service providers in the world, powering a significant portion of the internet. AWS also hosts data for several federal government agencies, including classified information. In 2013, Amazon signed a $600 million contract with the CIA to provide cloud hosting services. They also won a $10 billion Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, or JEDI, contract with the Department of Defense, or DoD, although that was later on disputed. This, though, isn't speculation. Amazon and the feds are working together at the highest levels. Choosing AWS for a darknet market is equivalent to setting up shop in front of a police station and asking a friendly officer to hold your product while you weigh it out in front of them. It's not just stupid or idiotic. It's absolutely reckless, and it's basically suicidal if you're trying to run an illegal business. Now, I won't say that it's impossible to do with AWS, because it's not, but given other issues that we will discuss, it's not like these guys are actually doing this from a place of anonymity. Any buyer or vendor that's actually using this market is potentially handing their information straight over to law enforcement, whether they realize it or not. In the announcement thread, it was pointed out that Blackhole Market is using IIS, or Internet Information Services, which is a Microsoft product. So right off the bat, it's cringeworthy. This decision is highly questionable for a darknet market to choose this software. So here we can see where Dark Web Informer says that they're using IIS, which is an issue. After Dark Web Informer says that, we see, them basically arguing that, hey man, it's all good. What's your problem? There's nothing wrong in using IIS. Microsoft's closed source nature and its long-standing history of corroboration with law enforcement make it an extremely poor choice for darknet market activities. Most darknet markets typically run on Linux-based systems. For a reason, Linux is open source, which allows for the community to audit and enhance its security on a regular basis. In contrast, IIS has a history of vulnerabilities that make it much less secure. Linux is open source, which allows the community to audit and enhance its security continuously. In contrast, IIS has a history of vulnerabilities that make it less secure. It could be argued that this isn't always true. As an example, if you had grandma set up your Linux server versus a seasoned pro set up IIS, you could hypothetically have IIS be the more secure one. I make this point to say that nothing is really definitely more secure than something else. It all depends on how it's set up and who sets it up. And I didn't want to say one's more secure than the other because it requires context, and without context, it could be kind of deceptive. However, typically, as far as historically, there is a massive favoritism towards Linux over closed source software. A study by TrustWave found that IIS was responsible for 8.7 of server-side vulnerabilities reported between 2000 and 2010, compared to less than half of that, or 3.7%, for Nginx. Just to give a parallel here about a recent story regarding why Microsoft is horrid for privacy in general was another option that Microsoft's rolling out called Recall in Windows 11. As many Recall basically captures screenshots every few seconds and stores them locally, potentially including sensitive information like passwords and financial data. Although Microsoft claims that this data is encrypted and not sent to their servers, the mere existence of such a feature possesses a very, very serious risk if the system is ever compromised. The implication for darknet users are absolutely clear. Using any Microsoft product, particularly IIS, in such an environment could absolutely expose critical data to law enforcement or malicious actors. I'm not saying that recall is actually implemented in server-side software because it's not, but I'm saying that Microsoft products in general don't respect privacy. Using a Microsoft product for a darknet market isn't just unwise, it's akin to a mechanic telling you to pour water into your gas tank. The risk of surveillance, discovery, and exposure are far too high to actually justify that choice, in my humble opinion. That's why serious darknet operators rely on things like Linux-based systems that offer better security, transparency, and reliability. Another post highlighted the catastrophic vulnerability in the Captcha system used by Blackhole Market in what can only be described as a massive security blunder. Their Captcha includes the answer in clear text within the SVG file. This is an egregious oversight that completely undermines the very purpose of having a Captcha to begin with, which is to distinguish human users from bots. But the implications go far beyond just Captcha itself. The glaring mistake reveals a profound lack of basic security knowledge on the part of the developers. If the team behind Blackhole can't even secure something as fundamental and simple as a Captcha without exposing the answer in plain text, it absolutely raises very serious concerns about the rest of their security practices. Remember, on the front of the website, they said they're all about that super high security. The other thing that I noticed was that there are multiple people, including admin Luna, which apparently is the admin's name, a developer named Alex, and Grex, who is apparently the development team admin. 3 people accessing one account. Again, horrible OPSEC. And that's even if we just say for the sake of accountability alone, they should all have separate accounts. So let's get back on topic though. Captchas are often the first line of defense against things like automated attacks, like brute force login attempts. When this defense is compromised, it leaves the entire platform vulnerable to more sophisticated attacks. The fact that such a basic security measure was so poorly executed or implemented absolutely suggests that there may be a ton of much more serious vulnerabilities that are inside the actual meat and potatoes of the site and the system as a whole. The fact that they implemented something that they didn't even understand is absolutely insane. It also tells me that, again, below the surface, there's going to be a whole myriad of hell security-wise. In cybersecurity, this concept is known more formally as the iceberg effect, where the visible issues are, you can see them easily, but they indicate a much deeper systemic problem. Basically, if they failed on something that's so rudimentary, like I said before, it is absolutely fair and logical to question what other critical components could be equally as flawed or exposed. This situation not only compromises user security, but it also casts a lot of doubt on the market's overall credibility and capability. In a place like the Darknet, where a simple slip-up can land you in prison for decades or life, oversights like that just aren't acceptable, especially when they're so simple. I've encountered plenty of sites with things like poor user interfaces or UI that were clunky and difficult to navigate. No doubt you have too. While this isn't always a deal breaker for people, it significantly reduces the number of people that actually want to engage with the site from the start. Blackhole UX is an absolute nightmare. For instance, the registration process is basically broken. I attempted to create an account, but it was just impossible. If a user can't even register, I mean, obviously it's unlikely that the market will ever grow into anything substantial. This problem absolutely hints at bigger issues. If registration is flawed, what can we expect from critical functions like placing orders, making disputes, the escrow system, or even browsing listings? It's obvious absolutely no even halfway testing went into this. Poor UI and UX are practically guaranteed to drive users away from any site, let alone a darknet market where reputation and ease of use are pretty paramount. This is why companies like Google and Apple invest so heavily in entire departments that are dedicated to things like UI and UX. They understand that a smooth, intuitive experience is absolutely fundamental for user retention and satisfaction. Now, in Blackhole's case, these issues are more than just inconveniences. They're red flags, and there's sets of red flags that we can look at to judge the market overall without knowing anything else about it. A market that can't get the basics right, it shouldn't just be angering to the people that are looking to use it or thinking about it or analyzing it. It's a sign of a much more deeper and systemic problem, like we were talking about earlier with the iceberg effect, that are likely to plague every aspect of the platform moving forward. Alex, Grex, and Luna obviously need a lesson in some basic web dev basics. There's a significant difference between development, testing, and production environments. And understanding these distinctions is essential, especially for something as sensitive as a darknet market. So for those that don't know, typically these tend to go something like this. First, you have the development environment, and this is where the code is written, right? And the initial tests by developers are carried out. It's often a pretty chaotic space where new features are rapidly prototyped and added and removed, and security is kind of less stringent at this point because the focus is building functionality pretty much. Not that it's non-existent, but it's just not a main focal point depending on how things work. Because then we get into CI/CD, a whole bunch of other things, but just keeping it basic, we'll just look at these kind of fundamentals. Next comes the testing environment. Once the basic functionality is in place, the code is moved to a testing environment. And here, the focus shifts from building out things to finding and fixing different issues or bugs that are inside of it. Security vulnerabilities and performance issues are analyzed at this step. According to a 2020 report, 63% of software vulnerabilities are introduced during development, making thorough testing essential before any release. This phase also includes stress tests, user acceptance tests, or UAT, and security audits. The goal is to identify and resolve issues before exposing real users to the platform. Do you see how now we can say like they didn't do any testing and pretty much know it for sure? Production environment. This is the final stage, and this is where the code is basically deployed to live servers and made available to the users. And at this point, the platform should be fully functional, secure, and absolutely ready for public interaction. Releasing a product to a production environment without extensive testing isn't just like a risk, or it could absolutely be disaster that's just waiting to happen. And with Blackhole, I would say that they just got halfway through the development and then just published it. I mean, based on what we see. I say that because their beta, it just completely disregards any of these principles. A beta release should be near complete version of the product that is functional, right? And theirs wasn't, but might need some like tweaks and adjustments. However, Blackhole's inability to even allow basic account registration isn't a kink, right? It's a fundamental failure that should have been caught during testing. According to IBM, fixing a security vulnerability after a launch is 30 times more expensive than during the design phase, which absolutely emphasizes the importance of extremely thorough testing before going live. Rushing to launch without proper testing and auditing is absolutely reckless, and it's like throwing a car on the market without checking if the brakes actually work. It's a complete lack of understanding of the development lifecycle and a disregard for basic operational security, which tells us a lot about the market itself and the people who run it. Like it just seems like a fly-by-night wannabe pump and dump scam market, and it's just absolute trash in my opinion. It's absolutely glaring obvious that there's a massive lack of any developer experience behind Blackhole Market. You don't need to be like some master full stack or back end or front end dev to be able to see that. The comments and issues that are reported by users that suggested things to developers, and the reaction of the developers tells us that they're actually learning on the job with the introduction post that they made of their market. Like building a darknet market isn't like launching a typical website or an app. It requires an intricate understanding of security, encryption, darknet operations, and the specific overlay network that they're using, in this case, Tor. Every tiny detail absolutely matters, and screwing up even the most minute aspect can absolutely have catastrophic consequences for both the market and its users. In fact, the vast majority of darknet market takedowns we see are typically due to some dumb, minor, nonsensical OPSEC issue. People making simple screw-ups that have profound results. For instance, a study by Verizon's 2023 data breach investigations reported that 74% of all data breaches involved the human element, such as misconfigurations, coding errors, or just poor security practices. In the context of a darknet market where the stakes are exponentially higher, having inexperienced developers is essentially a death sentence for that platform. And mind you, we haven't even addressed things like secure coding practices in all of this. We're staying away from those advanced topics. Also, they need to know about current attack methodologies related to that particular overlay network. Hiring or relying on developers who are learning as they go is insane. It's a guarantee for failure. These guys can't even make a Captcha correctly in this environment. There's absolutely no room whatsoever for trial and error. Every mistake could expose users to law enforcement or malicious actors, leading to arrests, people being robbed or extorted or worse. Luna, who appears to be the administrator of this darknet market, routinely downplays or outright dismisses user concerns, or at least we think it's Luna because they don't always sign who it is and they have multiple people actually using this account. These concerns often are highlighting very serious issues in terms of security, and this kind of dismissive attitude towards valid, significant feedback is a major red flag. It signals that the market just does not prioritize user security, which is absolutely critical for any successful operation. Vendors and buyers rely on the platform to protect their anonymity and safeguard their transactions. When an administrator like Luna brushes off concerns about security flaws, it suggests a fundamental lack of commitment to maintaining the platform's integrity. This really not only erodes any possible trust that they might have accrued, but it also guarantees that the market will struggle to attract reputable vendors. And in addition to that, it also shows that they take a nonchalant attitude towards security in general. Vendors in the darknet community typically value their reputation and OPSEC above all else. Associating with the darknet market that has a reputation for trash security management, I mean, in some ways, some vendors could see like that tarnishes their good standing, and no vendor wants to risk their livelihood on a platform that doesn't take security seriously. Aside from my own personal experience and observations, there's also a 2021 report by CipherTrace that says that darknet markets that fail to prioritize security often experience a decline in vendor participation and buyer confidence. Additionally, we also see a very generic response to no matter what anyone says. And typically it's almost always, hey, thanks for your concern. You've inspired us to do better. It's just the most nonsensical thing. It's crazy to actually read. As if the other issues weren't bad enough in this whole thing. Black market also appears to have a massive over-reliance on this feedback, the very feedback that we were just talking about, for identifying and fixing critical problems like they can't see. Like, feedback is incredibly valuable asset, in my opinion, personally. When I ask you for your thoughts on a particular issue, for example, the insights that I receive are invaluable. I learn a ton from them. There's an absolute level of practical, real-world experience in the feedback that I can't get from an AI or a book or a Google search. It's not going to happen. Which is why I often tell all of you guys who watch my videos that I love to hear back from you. Even if it's disagreeing points or agreeing points, I tend to learn a ton from everyone out there. That's why I always ask for feedbacks in my videos, because it genuinely helps me become a better person in general and more knowledgeable. However, the key point that I'm making here is that feedback should complement expertise, not replace it. For example, when we have that back and forth, it's typically reciprocal instead of being one-sided. And what I've noticed is that Blackhole team basically seems to almost entirely depend on user feedback to identify or address any issues, and some of the really very critical issues, which is insane because you can literally see them in some cases just by looking at the website. It's like these guys didn't even look at their own site. Like, this approach is absolutely flawed, and it's like me asking you to decide every single detail of my next video. Like, what should the topic be? How should I present it? And what should the thumbnail look like? What colors should it have in it? What context should it have in it? How should it be shot? Like, eventually, you're just going to lose interest because it's not your job to do all that crap. Like, I'm forcing you to do post-production, basically. And this is precisely what the Blackhole team is doing. They're outsourcing their responsibility to the users, which is not just lazy, it's dangerous. A successful darknet market requires a team with deep expertise in security, cryptography, and darknet ops who can anticipate and prevent issues before they're actually issues. The market's reliance on user feedback to patch glaring security holes or fix major functionality issues absolutely shows a major lack of expertise. It's almost like someone who just learned how to start an AWS instance, just spun something up and said, "Hey, here's the market, guys, check it out." And didn't even look at what they spun up. It's crazy. Even more frustrating is the fact that despite asking for feedback, they often dismiss or downplay the suggestions that they actually receive. And this is infuriating for someone like myself who actually values user input as much as I do. Feedback is an absolute gift. Like, people are taking their time out of their day to help you improve something that you've created. To not take it as something that's highly valuable, to me, is to be an entitled brat. Specifically, this is true because they're expecting all these people will give them feedback and then they will reject it outright when people actually provide it. Or they'll ignore it, or they'll trivialize the input, and in turn, not only alienates your users, but it also shows a complete lack of respect for their time and effort. And in the end, this kind of approach is just absolutely unsustainable. A market that can't stand on its own and relies entirely on its users to fix its problems is absolutely doomed to fail. Users will eventually get tired of pointing out the flaws that the developers should have already caught, and they'll move on to a different platform that actually values their security and their input. Imagine if a bank publicly announced that their vault doors were faulty and they just didn't know how to fix them, and they weren't going to. But they weren't worried about it. The entire financial world would go into a frenzy over that, and the bank would collapse overnight. No one would trust them with their money. And this is essentially what Blackhole Market is doing by openly discussing their security vulnerabilities like Captcha flaws and the use of IIS while offering dismissive responses. It's just an insanely self-destructive post I've never seen a darknet market actually do. You're practically begging for someone to break. The only thing keeping them safe at this point is the fact that no one's actually joined yet. But the lack of internal control and operational security is staggering. And darknet markets must operate under the absolute strictest confidentiality and security protocols, keeping any potential vulnerabilities tightly under wraps until you can actually fix them. And the moment you actually start discussing these issues openly, you undermine the very foundation of what a darknet market is actually supposed to provide: security and anonymity for the people who participate there, and some kind of verifiable reliability. Real-world organizations with serious security concerns absolutely handle these issues through internal audits, third-party firms, and private channels. And that's really the point here. But never in public forums, right? By failing to do so, Blackhole Market isn't just showing incompetence. They would be actively putting their users at risk if they had any. This whole darknet market looks like a kind of side project that, like, maybe a student who's in his first year of college just spun up to see how it would work out. It's a big thing that I would try to dissuade individuals from doing this kind of thing, because it can absolutely have very severe repercussions for them. Even if you don't have any type of vendors or buyers that actually transact on there, it could still be looked at as a conspiracy charge or an attempted conspiracy bid. As always, thank you for taking the time. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.